verse 4. All the earth. And they praised God because he turned the sea into what in verse 6? Dry land. Yeah. And how long will he rule by his power in verse 7? Forever. Yeah. I like that Psalm 66. Psalm 67, verse 2, God's way may be known throughout what? The earth. God's salvation is among whom? All nations. Verse 3 and 5, who will praise God? All nations and all peoples. Psalm 68, the first 3 verses is a call for God to rise in judgment against who? Verse 1 and 2. Yeah, enemies and the wicked. Yep. Verse 24 through 27 is a procession of God doing what? It could be several things here, I think. Yeah, I was thinking more like carrying the ark in the wilderness, or God leading his armies into battle. And it could actually be a messianic, with Jesus Christ as he comes to establish his reign. But I think you could be right too, Jonathan. It's just, when I read those verses, I just saw this procession, this like procession, all these people marching with the ark or something. Psalm 69 is a messianic psalm with the description of the suffering of Jesus Christ. It focuses on Jesus and David's emotional and spiritual suffering. Verse 2 and 3, not only is this person going to drown in deep water, but by what else? Yeah, mud and mire and junk. Why do these foes hate David in verse 4? Yeah. Yep. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And how many are there? How many foes are there? I didn't put a verse down for that. Yes. It's a lot. A lot of people hate David. Psalm 70. What are the last 3 words in the psalm? Yeah. So what you think is indicated by this cry? Yeah, quickly. They need this help quickly. Don't be delayed. I think David's kind of in a panic here. He's stricken, he's despair. He wants to be saved. Psalm 71, verse 3, who is his rock and fortress? Yeah. Verse 7, who is his strong refuge? God. Verse 19, whose righteousness is very high? God. Psalm 72, I think this is a why can't I say that word? Messianic psalm, coming out of a great king. It's one of the 2 psalms by Solomon. This psalm calls calls for a good king to govern Israel under God's blessing. Ultimately, this king is going to be Jesus Christ. So how will this king judge the people in verse 2? Righteousness. This king will have dominion from what? Yeah, from the river to the ends of the earth. And how many kings will fall down before him? Verse 11. And nations, kings and nations. All of them. Okay, Psalm 73, it's a story about the struggle with envy, doubts, and his faith in God. Through these struggles, he learns to trust in God. Any questions or comments on this psalm, Psalm 73? Psalm 74 is the poem describes God's actions in the past and his desire for his people, for him to act in the present. It's kind of a gloomy psalm, I thought. It starts out with a powerful question, which is, what was verse 1? What was the question? Yeah. 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 Any comments or questions on that? That was kind of one of those really gloomy.
Another one is Asaph, but the 73 and 74 are Asaph. They're kind of really deep, contemplative songs.
Yeah, I noticed that Asaph's psalms are a whole lot different than David's psalms. They're like night and day different. You can almost, without even knowing that, Asaph wrote it, that it was definitely not David's. Yeah, but it's just really gloomy, I thought. Just really depressing when I read the psalm. Psalm 75, who is judge, in verse 7? God. What will God do to the horns of the wicked and the horns of the righteous? In verse 10. Cut them off or exalt them in the righteous, right?
The horns of the righteous will be lifted up.
Okay. My version had exalted. So, okay. Psalm 76. God is more glorious and excellent than what? Verse 4. Mountains, yep. Mountains of prey. Verse 7, who is to be feared? God. Psalm 77, it's a psalm of a troubled believer. What are some questions he asks in verse 7 through 9 that leaves you to think that God is done with Asaph? Right. His promises failed. Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has his anger shut up in his tender mercies? Yeah. 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 And who leads his people like a flock? Verse 20. God. Psalm 78, it's Israel's history. And, once you start reading this psalm, they don't get it, do they? They just don't get it. So, basically, he tells them how God takes care of them, and they continue to rebel against him over and over again. Any comments on this?
Joshua told the group before he died, hey, Midian is going to be with you. And they're obeying, and they made him as long as, the last generation but then when the new generation came,
They didn't know.
they messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you think of everything God has done for them, you know. Departed the waters, gave them quail, gave them water, took care of them. And yet, it seems like every time you turn around, they were doing something rebellious.
Maybe that choice of a blessing or a curse, and God follows through with that curse if, they don't follow through and faithful.
Right. Yep. Psalm 79, it's an attack on Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. Any comments on this psalm? And then Psalm 80, who is the vine in verse 5 and 14? The vine. Not the vine dresser, the vine. It's Israel. Okay. Who dwells between the cherubim and is the shepherd of Israel? There you go. God. Verse 1. Yeah. What was Israel's plea here in verse 3, 7, and 19? Restore us so that we will be saved and cause your face to shine. Okay, so I'm going to be out on vacation for the next couple of weeks. And
Well, looks like we got a good storm going on out there somewhere. It's gonna compete with me tonight. Either that or when I make a point. I was preaching a sermon one time, and I was talking about Noah.
And I said, there are people back then. They were so wicked. And I just did like that, and lightning bolt struck right by the church building. Boom! Like that. So, they must have been real wicked. Oh, boy. I'm crazy. I'm a nut. I'm sorry. Took y'all a while to get that one. All right. So we are doing the map work for, it's going to be the 6th map in the back of the book here. And I apologize, I really do, for the little old bitty print on this one. Not all of them are like that, but the print on this one particular map is just, leaves much to be desired. But I got all these maps from one source, and so we roll with it. Anyway, let's see here. There we go. All right, we'll get to that in just a moment. But Chris, would you mind leading us in prayer before we begin?
Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the opportunity to be here and learn a portion of your word. Regardless of the weather, we're so thankful that we can make it. Please, Lord, help us to tone in what we're learning, block out the world for this hour. And help us, Lord, to apply what we read and learn, and help us to be better service to you. To Brother Jonathan, and help him to teach in such a way that we learn and understand. Be with all the sick in our congregation and help them, Lord, to recuperate and come back to service to you. Forgive our sins. Be with us all. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Thank you. So basically the goal of this map, I think, is just to familiarize us with, remind us of really the surrounding peoples as the people have come in to possess the land of Canaan, and now they have kings to rule over them, and it really is the glory days in a great sense, especially during the times of David and Solomon. But what does the lay of the land look like? Because it's not just God's people living in the land. They have different people that have kind of settled in around them, people that they have not completely conquered, and people who are sort of their neighbors that are actually their kin, in a way. And so this map, kind of the things that had you fill in, kind of some of them are kind of along those lines. So let's just kind of start looking at this, kind of looking at these outlier, these surrounding peoples around here. Who's this down here? What are these people down here? That's Amalek. That's the Amalekites. And how do they play a role in the story of the Bible? Yep. They attacked them, and then God said, I'm going to get them. I'm going to judge them for that, what they did to Israel. And so Saul was supposed to go in and utterly destroy them. He didn't do it. That's right. But old Samuel hacked that king up right there before the Lord. Who's these people here? Moab. Who are the Moabites? Where are they from? Yeah. Yeah. Lot's daughters. Yeah. Lot and this other one here. Who's this? Ammon. So Ammon.
The child of the other daughter that Lot
Yep.
had.
So these.
So they're cousins. They're also cousins to the Israelites.
Yes. Yeah. So these are all, you could call them Sethites. They're all, or not Seth, Shemites. Thank you. They're all Shemites. All from that family. And then, of course, down here, it's not on the map, but there's a big kingdom down here of great people, actually. Very strong, very powerful. Edom, yeah. And, of course, Edom is Esau. So, as the children of Israel are set up around this land, they've got the Canaanites that they're contending with, that they're dealing with, that they're fighting with. But they also have sort of these neighbors that are sort of kind of kinfolk, but not close kin. You can call them cousins, maybe, like I said. And they sometimes have these sparrings with them. It's not always a good relationship, right? And so that kind of comes into a play in a lot of the biblical story. What about up here? What's this area up here at the top? Lebanon. Why is Lebanon important? How does that come into play? That's right. That's where the cedars come from. So when Solomon builds that huge temple, he gets cedars from Lebanon, and he actually brings them in, and he transplants them. And he makes, in his day, the cedar as abundant as the sycamores in the lowlands, which is a lot. So the cedars of Lebanon. All right, so there's a few places here. What's this place here? Jabesh Gilead. And these people were the people that buried Saul, or took Saul. He had been killed in an honorable way, and they disposed of the body in an honorable way, and David found out about it, and he was happy about that. But they honored Saul. It kind of comes into play in Saul's. What about this place here? It's Geshur. Geshur, y'all know anything about how Geshur plays into the story? It's kind of an obscure place, but it comes into play in the story of the kings. It is, unless you looked it up, I mean, I wouldn't expect you guys to know it. It's where Absalom flees to? Well, it's where he's banished to. He thinks it's banishment. Pretty much everybody thinks it's banishment, pretty much, and it sort of is banishment, where, you know, he has his brother killed because he rapes his half-sister. Amnon does, and so, yeah, just a lot of trouble there. So that's where. What about this place here? Hazor, yeah, we've talked about Hazor, one of those places that Joshua conquered. What about up here? Dan? And just kind of looking ahead, Dan is one of the places where Jeroboam sets up those calves, and we'll look at that next time. What about up here? We talked about this place last time. Mount Hermon, yeah. Of course, right here, this river, Jordan River, this place here, Jerusalem here. Hebron? Hebron is the place where David reigned. It's where David first became king, and then he became king in Jerusalem later on. Yeah, Jebusites, that's right. Now, these people over here, who's settling along the coast? We're going to talk a good bit tonight about these people over here. The Philistines, yeah. And I've got 4 of the 5 cities, big, heavy-hitting Philistine cities marked out. What's this one? Ashdod. By the way, there today in Ashdod, right there, there's a Philistine museum. It's one of the few places where you can go and actually see. We don't have a whole lot of archaeology about Philistines, but there's actually a museum there. Got a picture or two tonight from there. This place right here, Akron, then Gath, and then Gaza, and then Ashkelon is the other one. I didn't mark that one out. Okay, good. So, we're going to talk mostly about the Philistines tonight. We'll get to that in just a moment. But just a couple of archaeological corroborations about the kings. We don't really have any archaeological evidence about Solomon, but we do have a little bit about David, and there's some heavy hitters here. So the Tel Dan Stele is about some of the interactions that basically it's got some Hebrew inscriptions on it referring to some of the people of Israel. And there's actually multiple kings mentioned here. Ahab and one of his sons, I believe we'll mention that next time. But also the house of David. The house of David is mentioned on this inscription here. I bet you some of y'all have heard about this before, the Moabite stone, or the Mishi Stele. It actually has reference to the personal name of God, Yahweh. It's a Moabite stone. It's basically talking about how the Moabite God helped, and they're looking at it from their point of view, right? The Moabites. They're looking at it from the point of view of how the Moabite God helped the Moabites defeat these surrounding peoples. And some of the surrounding peoples are listed. And some people contend that the house of David is also in this inscription, except it's sort of in the corner where, like, you can tell, like, not, some of it's been broken off or whatever, or covered up. So there's some contention about whether or not it says house of David, but some people have the opinion that right there in the corner somewhere, where it's kind of smudged, says house of David. But anyway, I think it's cool because it also has this reference to Yahweh, you know, from an outsider's point of view looking in, saying, here's their God, you know, the Moabite. All right. Now, we don't really have any archaeological evidence for Solomon's temple, but hey, I just had to mention it. Like, there's been, you can look at different images. AI has different renderings of it, but they're not really accurate. There's been some paintings and stuff, really neat paintings that people have done of Solomon's temple. I don't think any one of them done it justice, though. Just when you read about the amazing structure that this was, all the gold that went into it, it would have been absolutely spectacular. Probably not accurate.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Of like all the things like they had the, the campstands on top of this. And,
Yeah.
The pomegranates and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no columns or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's the columns around the colonnade on the outside.
Uh-huh.
On the temple itself. So.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Yeah. I thought I'd throw something in there. So I want to talk about the Philistines tonight, and I actually I kind of went into a little bit of down the rabbit hole, just a little bit, and I realized that I said something Sunday that I need to correct. I actually learned something. So we're going to get to that, but I want to talk about the Philistines because these are heavy-hitting people. They're big in the story of the kings, Saul and David, especially, and later on in the biblical story, the Philistines resurface. But they are a great contender in the land. They're like these little pests that will not leave. They just will not go away. They're there for a very long time. Sometimes God's people will get the upper hand for a time, but then they'll sort of come back. And we see that in Saul's time, David's time. David really defeated a lot of the Philistines. This is basically on stone. There's this representation of the Philistines being carried away captive by the Egyptians. And these are these are thought to be Philistine captives. And it's been thought that this was really hallmark of the Philistine army, that they had this feather cap, like this feathered helmet that they wore that sort of had a tuft on it. And you can see that represented here in these helmets here. Like I said, at that museum that I was talking about, the Philistine Culture Museum, there's just a lot. Basically, mostly what's there is a lot of pots and pans and pottery and stuff like that. Just standard stuff. Not really that big of a thing. Now, the Philistines, this is their area, this is their land. They had 5 major towns: Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, Gath, and Ekron. Now, Gath is a really important. Gath, y'all remember some things about Gath?
That's where Goliath was from, I think.
That is where big old Goliath was from.
And he had some brothers that were just as big.
And he had some brothers that were just as big. They even had like 6 toes or whatever. Kind of weird. Like these are big dudes. And that's one of the things about the people who live in Palestine, that live in this area of the world back then. There's all these stories of giants. I mean, when the people went into the land of Canaan, right? What did they see when they first spied out the land? Giants, the Anakim, and there was some people, we're going to read about them in just a moment, called the Zanzumim, the giants of the land. And so evidently there were some giants among the Philistines and such. These are some ruins of Gath. There's just not much in this part of the world left of these cities. Not a whole lot to speak of. There's some ancient ruins like this if you go over there. But a lot of these places have been confirmed by archaeologists that these places existed. And like I said, there's that Philistine Museum in Ashdod. You go over there today, that area, go in there. I don't know I don't know if it's off limits or not, that area. But okay. Now here's the thing about the Philistines, and here's what I wanted to correct. So the way I represented it last Sunday was that what's going on in the land of Canaan is that not all of the nations that God intended to judge has been driven out. And so what's going on in the time of the kings is they're still trying to defeat these nations. A little bit of a clarification, though, something that I probably need to correct on this. I sort of represented the Philistines as being part of those Canaanite nations that that God wanted to defeat. However, I learned this: the Philistines are actually not Canaanites. They're actually not in the list. There's like a list in Deuteronomy 7 of all of the ites, all the Canaanites, and you can also find that list in Genesis chapter 10 on the table of nations. We're going to look at it here in just a moment. But the Philistines were a separate people. They were a wicked people, and God, I think, intended to judge them too. But there's a little bit of nuance here. They actually had their own God, different from the Canaanite God. Their God, their major God, we read in Samuel, was Dagon, sort of like this fishman. You remember what happened with Dagon? Y'all remember what happened with Dagon? Yeah, he fell over. Remember when they captured the ark? Philistines captured the ark of God, and they thought they had something really, really powerful. Well, it ended up being a nightmare for them. And so Dagon fell over and fell down, and that was showing Dagon wasn't anything to be excited about as far as being their God. So they had their own system. They were their own people. Now, here's some scriptures we're going to look at. And so we'll kind of, I think this is relevant. We're going to look at this because the Philistine people they were related to the Canaanites, but they were not actually the Canaanites. So who were the Canaanites? Who were they descendants from? Do y'all remember? Going way back. It's not Cain. It would have to be Ham or Japheth. So which one is it? It's Ham. Yeah, there you go. It is Ham. So remember, back in Genesis 9, there's this really sketchy thing that goes on in Noah's tent, right? He gets drunk, and his son sees him, and there's this thing. And then, who's Noah cursed? He curses somebody. He doesn't curse Ham. That's what's interesting. He doesn't curse Ham. Who's he cursed? Genesis 9. Somebody read Genesis 9, 24 through 28. Yeah, that's good. That sort of gets to it here. So, cursed be who? Canaan. Who's he going to serve? Shem. Now, see, this is playing out in the biblical story here once we get to the Israel in the land of Canaan, because the Israelites are Shemites, and the Canaanites are the descendants of Canaan. Now, that was one of Ham's children. However, Ham had multiple children. The sons of Ham. So you go over to Genesis 10. Genesis 10. Someone read Genesis 10 and verse 6.
And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan.
All right. Now, here's where the Philistines come from. The Philistines are not Canaanites. They're not from Canaan. They are from another son of Ham. They are Mizraimites. So if you come down to verse, let's see. Yeah, it's down there. Yeah. Mizraim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrusim, and Casluhim, from whom came the Philistines and the Caphtorim. So the Philistines are from Casluhim. How'd you like that for a name? Casluhim. He slew it. So people are pretty much in agreement.
With, were you reading out of the
New King James.
King James?
Yeah.
It really says, Philistine.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
From who came the Philistines?
It's a different variation in the King James.
Oh, really? Really? What is it? What is this like variation?
Philistine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
So,
It's obvious.
yeah. So his descendants are called the Philistines and the Caphtorians. Now, it's pretty much, there's not much debate that these people actually came from the island of Crete, and that they're actually conquerors of the land of Canaan before Israel comes in and conquers. That they actually, like the Moabites, like the Ammonites, like the Edomites, they actually come in just like those folks, just like Israel, and they dispossess the people of the land of Canaan. So the land of Canaan is contenders. See, the Canaanites, this is something I'm learning about this whole thing. The Canaanites are not necessarily buddy-buddy with the Philistines, or the Ammonites, or the Moabites, or the Edomites, or maybe the Amalekites too. So the seven nations, by the way, here's the Canaanites. Here's the Canaanites. You're in Genesis 10. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, in Heth. The Jebusite, the Amorite, the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zeramite, the Hamathite. Those are the Canaanite people, distinguished from the Philistines. So this is interesting to me. So it gets even more interesting. By the way, here's where we're at on the map. Thought I'd throw this up here. Crete is actually a pretty big island, in that if you zoomed out all the way and looked at the world, you could spot the island of Crete as a little bitty dot, like right there. It's a huge, huge island. And so these people, it's thought, came and migrated by sea. They were seafarers and came and landed here and conquered part of the land. That's why they're set up on that side of the land of Canaan, by the way, because they conquered by the sea. And they didn't push. Evidently, they couldn't push as far inland. Now, let's see here. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 2. Here's what I want to show you all. Deuteronomy chapter 2. The Philistines, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Moabites, these people are distinguished from the Canaanites. They are actually playing a role in doing what Israel is doing, and that's defeating Canaanites. For whatever reason, God just does not like those nations, in particular, all those ites that came from the Canaanites. He didn't just want them dispossessed. He wanted them gone, annihilated. They were so wicked. And what we kind of read about in Deuteronomy 2, we actually get a hint, I think, and I want to know what y'all think. I'm just learning this. I'm kind of stumbling upon this in my studies. Like, I wrote this book and everything I did, but I'm still figuring all this out. I'm still learning. So I want to hear from what y'all think about this. Deuteronomy 2, starting in verse 16, Moses is sort of summarizing some of the battles. And he's accounting to the Israelites past history of the land of Canaan and what's been going on. And he's talking about what God's doing with the Canaanites, with these other nations like the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Philistines. Okay. Now remember, who also came from Casluhim? The Philistines and the Caphtorim. So remember that word Caphtorim as we read this. Somebody read Deuteronomy 2, 16 through 23. 16 through 23.
As soon as all the men of war had perished and were dead from among the people, the Lord said to me, "Today you are to cross the border of Moab at Ar, and when you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, Rephaim. Rephaim formerly lived there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim.
There you go.
People great and many, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place, as he did for the people of Esau who live in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place even to this day. As for the Avim who lived in the villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorim who came from Caphtor destroyed them and settled in their place.
There it is. And the Caphtorim are, most people think, are the Philistines, or the similar people. Okay, this is the descendants of Casluhim, Ham. The descendants of Casluhim, whose ancestor was Mezarim, or whoever, yeah, that person, and then Ham. Yeah, there you go. Cool. That's right. You're smart, Jim. You're smart. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, notice the way Moses put it in verse 21. But the Lord destroyed them before them. Who's he talking about?
Those giants.
Yeah, he's talking about the Zamzummim being destroyed by who? The Ammonites. But who's doing it? Who's doing it before them? The Lord. Here's what I want y'all to see. Outside of the Israelite history and their conquest and all this going on, God's doing things all over the world. He's doing things. Here's what I get from this passage, and just if y'all disagree with it, let me know. But like what I see from this passage is that there's this broad story going on of God. He's going to judge the nations of Canaan. That curse upon the Canaanites is going to be fulfilled. The Canaanites are going to be servants of the Shemites. And so God fulfills that not only by Israel coming in and conquering Canaan, but he also does it through Edom, he does it through Moab, he does it through Ammon, and he does it through the Philistines. Now, were they wicked people too? Absolutely. God had his judgment on those nations, but he's also using these surrounding people, which, by the way, some of them are Shemites too. Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites. See, they're all Shemites. And it's through them as well that whenever they conquer the Canaanites and they subdue them, that prophecy in Genesis 9 is coming to fulfillment. That's what I say. So it is just neat to me to learn that, you know, you got all this history going on with Israel, and God is really concerned with that. But he's working big picture in the whole world, pitting nations against one another, making kingdoms to rise and fall. I mean, that's what Moses is recounting here. And that's kind of the backdrop. It's kind of the behind the scenes. That's kind of what I was trying to get at Sunday, is that we have all these stories of great battles, you know, between said person like David or Saul and then this surrounding nation or this Canaanite people. But there's a bigger picture going on around that, and that's God working out his divine purposes, working all things according to his will. And, I mean, it just shows, I think, the power of the greatness of God. So, anyway, thoughts? What y'all think about that?
Did it say the Lord destroyed more people than the Israelites?
Yeah, like that was in the battle. That was in one of the battles. You talking about one specific battle?
I mean, all the battles, he used the Israelites to win, but
Yeah.
it was him that.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, and that's so true. See, that's what we need to see about all of this, is that when this is not just nations having it out. This is God performing his will in the kingdoms of men. This is, yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Thank y'all for your kind attention tonight. And if you have any insight into this Philistine thing and like the history of the Philistines or stuff like that, let me know and talk to me about it. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't know what it was at first, but I saw the initials, and then I didn't even know it was for him. They didn't even say anything. Like when we were there, they didn't say anything about it. So I didn't even know he died. I looked at it. It's a 777. It was that like. But the thing about these, because I looked up flight. Yeah, I don't.
They're still fighting over there. That's the thing. Like, the more you dig into who these people are, the more you realize the same old thing. This just keeps on happening. And we haven't even talked about the Ishmaelites, which are like the Arab people, and they're always causing.
I didn't realize that it was gonna happen.
Yeah, it is.
The first one that went like directly over us. But I wasn't ready for it.
Oh, really? Really? Yeah, you can tell me, please. Yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah, you did. That's right.
Good evening. Number 166. You love me so? Number 166. Why did my Savior come to earth and choose the humble go? Why did he choose the lowly bird? Because he loved me so. He loved me so.
Elijah did not have to move the mic back up for me. Isn't it pretty amazing how perfect God's plan and God's design is? I know we talked about that a little bit in class. God, He gives us so many things, but one of those blessings and one of those parts of that plan are children, right? And no matter the circumstances, we've all had experience with children, whether it's our own, others, and it's a lifelong thing. You're watching other people's children, especially being a part of a spiritual family like this, watching those children being really, to a certain extent, a part of raising them. And we see throughout that time, no matter our perspective, and it changes over time as well too, that they need guidance, that they need a continual reminding of some things, they need discipline. And I was reminded of this, probably, I thought about it yesterday or Monday, and when, I don't even remember what it was, but Amelia did something, and I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And it just hit me about, reminded me about this thought of how we are God's children in His creation. It's not the first time I've thought about it, but it just is a good fresh thought to circle back to. And to remind us how perfect His plan is and how He knows everything. And He knew that from the beginning of time. We see this thing throughout the Bible, but in John 1, it talks about how, as John's introducing, or having kind of his introductory chapter to his book, he says in verse 12, but to all who did receive me, who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of the blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And how awesome that is. But we have this dynamic, this child-parent relationship. We have it here on this earth, physically. We have it with God. We see that. But then you look at a verse like Matthew 7:23, when He says, there will be people, I say, depart from me, I never knew you. And that doesn't sound like a parent-child relationship, does it? It's to me, I kind of had the thought from a physical standpoint, it's like, yep, that's a kid that never listened to me, wouldn't listen to anything I ever said, was always smarter than me. But that's not how a parent relationship works. It's intended to be that stream that God paid for us, that we're taught by our parents. God teaches us through His Word. We have to have that right balance to have the right attitude. But it definitely goes better when our kids listen to us the first stinking time, doesn't it? And it just made me think, why do not we not listen to our Heavenly Father? And every one of us is guilty of it. But that is the beauty of God's plan, is we have that path laid out, and we have the opportunity to stay in that relationship with Him as a child of His. So if you need prayers tonight, if you need a hug, if you need to become a child of God, we're here for you, and we would love to help you and pray for you. So if you would like to heed that invitation, please come to the forefront as we stand and sing.